Click on the link I just sent you.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Speak, please.
Can you hear me?
There's something wrong with your microphone, I think. I don't know. I mean,
I can hear you.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah,
Sorry,
I
sir.
think I
Yeah.
had the speakers off.
Can you hear me?
I hear you now. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's look at your paper. So, I want to help students polish their English. So and I'll share the screen. And
Yes.
so share screen. And this is it. So share screen. So the EU consists of 27 countries as the UK left the Union on January 2020. And the member states' support toward the EU differ by countries, yet they continue to follow the rules mentioned in the treaties. As stated in the Maastricht Treaty, citizens of EU are the people who holds or have the nationality of the member states. Should be hold or have. Either one's okay. My task here is to help you polish your English. So which one do you prefer?
As I started in Maastricht Treaty, citizens of EU are the people who, but like, because I thought it was people, I get always confused with who would like the plural thing.
Yeah, I know.
Because
it's just a matter of,
people is the
either one's okay, either one's right. It's just that for you to learn to polish your English, it's better if you think about it and choose rather than me just tell you how I would write it. So that's why, I always put these two choices down because I want you to choose what you want. And you have to know right now, either one's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
You can think about it, but
so you're correcting my word choice, not my grammar, right?
Yeah. Right.
Okay,
well, that S should not be there.
Okay.
Okay. The nationality of the member states. Also, as a citizen of a member state or of an EU member state, which do you prefer?
An
okay.
EU members.
Of an EU member state, yeah. You can get there needs to be that indefinite. What do you call it? An indefinite particle before that. So yeah, which can be defined as countries who sign the treaty, they have the rights and duties given from the EU. Okay, based on this, the model citizens or the ideal citizens. Either one. I'll let you think about it.
Wouldn't model be better because that's what you've written on the question? So like it's introduction. So I wanted to have a connection to the question.
Okay, well maybe okay, then you mean modal. Modal means typical citizens. Okay, so modal means the typical citizens are citizens of the EU in terms of their
it's not,
identity.
So it's not model.
No, model means ideal.
Oh.
Modal means typical. Most common category. So what a modal.
Because what everybody in our class thought was that you mistype it. So instead of model AL, we thought it was EL.
If I go to just a second here. If I go to Wikipedia, you look up the word modal. Here. So share screen and yeah, modal. it's I'm looking for, well, there's a lot of different definitions, but it means the most common or biggest category. So, but I don't, there's not too much time we have here left, so I want to go back to the paper. Okay, so, and the of the EU or the European Union, again, I'll let you choose, and who sincerely follow the rules of the treaty. So you want to create a situation where the typical citizen, not everybody, because you never end a situation where everybody behaves that way, but the most typical European Union citizen wants to follow the rules and feels sincerely to follow the rules of the treaties. That they want to act like Europeans, and that means following European Union rules. That's what you say are imagining what this creation of a European identity means, right? That
Yes.
the typical citizen of Germany or Italy or France feels that they are also citizens of Europe and they must follow European rules. And you're never going to get everybody like that, but you want to get the most common, typical Frenchman or German or Italian or Bulgarian or Estonian will that emerge in 80 years? Change in identity may differ by individuals, but overall it is believed that regardless of the level of Europeanization they have, a significant. Either one's okay. I mean, and that's probably never going to go away in terms of national identity being very important. I mean, like we were talking about in class. I mean, I liked your essay because you highlighted these points. As we talked about in class, that people have many identities. I have many identities. You have many identities. And they don't go away just because I'm an American. I also feel very strongly about, I could feel very strongly about the world well-being as one of my communities, or my Catholic identity, or my, if I'm part of an Italian diaspora, I might be very, so we're going to have lots of identities, but so national identity doesn't have to disappear. But the question is, can we build something on top of it? Can we build a European identity in which, through dynamic processes of negotiation and practice and habit forming institutions, that we create something that's more than the sum of the European nation member states parts? Like when you build a house, you take these bricks and you put the bricks together and you build a house. And the house is something more than just a bunch of bricks. It's a house. It's not just a pile of bricks. It's a house. You need the bricks to make the house, but the house is more than just a pile of bricks. So that's something, maybe one way to look about European Union, that there will always be Greek and French and German identity, at least for many years, but to construct something more on top of that with those parts. That's critically important. And how does that affect the modal European Union's thinking? What will that look like in the future, 80 years from now?
Exactly.
And I think it might look like the belief that there's a European way of doing things, that we Germans or French or Italians, we're many things, including members of families and companies and religions, and we're Germans and we're French and Italians, and there's certain ways we go about resolving our disputes, our conflicts. And you're not supposed to use violence. You're not supposed to mobilize armies. You're not supposed to threaten each other with force the way Europe did until 1945. You're not supposed to do that anymore. There's a European liberal democratic way of resolving conflicts, to resolve our disputes. And we all agree that we are committed to that. And then we also develop a loyalty to that ethical community and it's an ethical community. It's a belief that thing, and if we develop a loyalty to it, we believe it exists. Because remember, Europe doesn't exist except up here. Korea doesn't exist except up here. United States doesn't exist except up here. These all exist only here.
Imagine community.
We believe in them. Will we believe in Europe? Will we believe intensely in Europe? Will we believe that we have a loyalty to Europe, the way your modal South Korean citizen feels they have a loyalty to Korea, or your modal American citizen has a loyalty to the American ethical community, right? Because ethics is the science or the philosophy of morals. What's the right and wrong way to behave? What's the right and wrong way of doing things? And people get emotional about that. I mean, you don't, if you do right things, you do bad things, wrong things, boo. We might even put you in jail for doing bad things. So there's emotion tied to that. So can we imagine that emerging at a more intense level, at a European level in 80 years? And so, so in the case of Poland, they are one of the pro-EU member states or countries. Either one's okay. I'll let you choose. Yet they have a tendency to not consider EU-related policies important, which shows that it is difficult for identity to change. In Poland, none of the elections or election campaigns, yeah, I mean, people don't know that, that's an interesting point. You say they don't consider EU policies to be important, and in the sense that they don't really understand your typical modal Polish citizen, not everybody, not the college professors, not the college students, the modal typical Polish adult doesn't know the details about European Union policy, but they don't know the details about Polish policy. Like, or let's pick on the Americans. How many Americans know the details about how the social security pension system in the United States functions? They don't know that, but they feel very strongly about the United States. They're nationalists. So yeah, I mean, maybe your typical Polish person doesn't think and talk much about European policies, but they might feel very strongly about Europe at the same time, because particularly if they have enemies that I think are not European, like the Russians, right? I mean, Poland, they have arguments, the Polish political leaders have arguments with the European leaders about LGBTQ rights and so on. But at the same time, I mean, they are committed to being part of Europe for a lot of reasons, including the fact that they hate Russia. And Russia is outside of the European Union. And by being in the European Union, Poland is stronger to deal with its enemies, Moscow, for example. And that people get very emotional about that. If you see a threat to your identity community, that or whether it be your family or your nation, right? In Poland, none of the election, I mean, so some may believe that this tendency of Poland is because they have completely adapted to the EU system, but writers consider that most of the EU-related issues are fortunately not provoking or not generating interest of Polish people. Yeah, okay, yeah, I mean, and people might have very specific interests, like if American farmers. Let's pick on American farmers or Polish farmers. Polish farmers, I'm sure they know a lot about, generally speaking, the Common Agricultural Policy of the European Union, the CAP, the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, because they get a lot of money from it. That affects their lives. And they know probably only about that, right? But about, for example, European Union policy regarding telecommunications or banking regulations. They don't know anything about banking, right? So and that's true everywhere. I mean, American farmers, they know a lot about American government farm subsidy policies, but they don't know anything about, they don't know anything about the vast areas of the government's policies focus. So so I say, okay, you should divide up long sentences into 2 sentences based on, okay, member states, country of the EU. Instead, they care more about national issues. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But at the same time, this European system is a way by which to make Poland stronger. We're more influential in the world, right? I mean, I think I talked about this well, maybe I didn't talk about it in this class, but like, for example, when I was in Bulgaria, Bulgaria is a small country. It's about 7 million people now. They have these big problems where they're losing their population. People are moving out and they're not having babies. But it's a small, weak, poor country. And when they joined the European Union, their government became much more influential in Moscow, in Washington, in Seoul, in Tokyo, in Addis Ababa, everywhere, because everybody knows that Bulgaria has the support of other European Union countries, and that they are supposedly committed to maintaining unity. So, because the European Union is very important to all of them. So if Bulgaria desperately needs help, France, Paris, and Berlin and Rome are more likely to listen to little Bulgaria when it's got a problem with North Korea, or it's got a problem with South Korea, or it's got a problem with any country outside of the European Union. And I saw it. I mean, it was just obvious. And so that means, and people know this, and that makes them feel, I like Europe because it's good for me as a Bulgarian. And yeah, Europe. Woo! So that's how that one element example of how that construction of a house out of a bunch of bricks might begin. Insofar as people associate the European Union with making their country great or greater in the world than it would otherwise be. And that might be true among small countries in particular, right? I mean, at the same time, you have to make sure that the small countries feel that they're not endangering themselves by being gobbled up by the big European Union member states. And the European Union seems to have done a good job of persuading them that they are not going to be gobbled up. There's some concern, like I always wonder, why won't the Czech Republic adopt the euro? And the Czech Republic has a border with Austria and Germany. And Austria and Germany invaded and occupied the Czech lands during World War II. And they remember that. And I'm wondering, I mean, this needs to be investigated, but I'm wondering how much of that is due. They won't join the euro because they think they love the European Union, but they're still a little worried about German economic colonial imperialism. That if you adopt the euro, you're adopting basically Germany's finance, monetary policies. And who knows what the Germans will do if the Czech Republic becomes completely committed to the euro, which is basically based upon German monetary policy. Germany makes that work, the euro, as we saw in the debt crisis dealing with Greece. They put up most of the money for the Greeks, right? Mm-hmm. So there's still, but otherwise, you know, so maybe the small, and certainly the small countries like Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, I mean, they're on the border with Russia. They used to be part of the Soviet Union until the Soviet Union fell apart 20 years ago. They got a lot of, some of them, Estonia and Latvia have lots of Russians living inside them as a minority group, but big minority. Well, yeah, man, we're in the euro. They wanted so much to be in the, and they all joined the euro as well as NATO. You know, they don't have a problem at all with being closely tied to Germany. So, and so that summarizes the point that I made here, right?
Yeah.
A shared community of faith. I was thinking about this as I've been thinking about this because I've been trying to write things about this myself. I told you I have to write papers too, just like you got to write papers, right? So, I mean, that this notion of a shared community of faith, that also can be understood as that when you believe that, it means, for example, I believe Korea exists. What does that mean? It means that Korea's got the people living in that we call Korea, that community of people have a common past of a common past of shared destiny, of shared fate, and therefore we have the expectation of a common future. That my fate and well-being is based upon this well-being of Korea, if I'm a Korean or an American. That's what I believe. And I believe it by just assuming it. I don't even think about it. Right? And that is a shared notion of a common community of fate. That my fate is intimately tied up with America's fate. Poland's fate is a Polish person's fate is intimately tied up with the fate of Poland. And to the extent to which Poland's fate is believed to be intimately tied up with Europe, as represented by the European Union, is part of this effort to construct a European, a higher level, supranational, ethical community of shared fate, destiny, same words. And if people believe that, then it exists, because it exists in terms of their behavior. Because you know what exists up here by the way people behave, by what they do, including what they say. Because this is rhetoric, and rhetoric is about ethics. Rhetoric is about me trying to persuade you what the right way and wrong way to behave is. And that means I will appeal to you in terms of romantic symbols, about being European, about democracy, about human rights, about the glory of Korea. And then also, this notion of a shared community of faith includes this notion of loyalty. You must be loyal. You must not be a traitor to the nation. You must not be a traitor to Korea. You must not be a traitor to Poland. And so loyalty is also part of this behavior pattern that we see people show, that shows that, oh, there's this thing called Poland or Germany or Italy that exists, or Bulgaria that exists in people's minds, brains. So how do we construct that at a European level? And you certainly can't fight national identity. You got to work with it. You got to use it as a dynamic building block. It's not just, see, we use these metaphors because we don't have a lot of ways to talk about these things, but you know, it's like you got to use this dynamic brick. It's got dynamic changing properties, and you've got to use this dynamic changing properties and put them together with the other dynamic changing bricks to create this thing that people believe exists called Europe. And they believe that they should be loyal to it. And they didn't do it. They evidently didn't do it in Britain, because the British don't think they need to. And they don't think they need to because they didn't lose World War II and World War I. They have a very high power, personal power. They have a very high relative capability-based estimation. They could be wrong. People make misperceive, make mistakes all the time. Nationalists in particular do that all the time. But even Bulgaria, they don't think they need to compromise on this because they're great. We won both world wars. We've got this whole world of Anglo-Saxon English-speaking peoples, the Americans, the Canadians, the Australians. We've got the former empire, India, Pakistan. We got all sorts. We don't need to be one among many in the European Union. And they could be wrong because stereotypes are wrong. Stereotypes are oversimplifications. And nationalists are prone to do that. But Germany, France, I mean, you look at what Germany has done, for example, in the COVID-19 pandemic. They have compromised. They have not been willing to act as Germany first on the vaccine. They have not been able, they've not acted that way. So they're not showing German vaccine nationalism. They're not acting like German nationalists, even though they could have done more because they're committed to this European thing so far. They could have acted like Britain, but they didn't. So this is really fascinating. And this is what I'm working on. So I like talking about these things because I get these ideas I have to write down. But, you know, somebody else has signed up for 12 o'clock, so we have to stop. And,
yes. I have one question before we leave. Yeah. While I was writing an essay, I kept having these doubts to my thoughts, because what I thought when I was writing my points is that if Poland doesn't think European policy is important, and if UK left the EU, in this case, isn't it the fact that Europeanization is not happening?
Well, I mean, it is, you know, it depends on how you want to define Europeanization. If,
okay.
I mean, if you want to, you know, define Europeanization the way we've just been talking about it, you and I now, then there's a problem with Britain leaving the European Union, it would seem, because they reject this notion that they have a commitment to doing things in a European way, and they explicitly rejected that by leaving the European Union. By leaving, they're no longer subject to the Court of Justice of the European Union. They're not bound by their rulings. They explicitly rejected that. So they might still be cooperative and liberal and resolving conflicts, but they have formally rejected. They are obligated to act in a European way. They can do whatever they want. Then they might and they won't because of high economic costs. But you know, who knows what the world will turn into? You know, what if Donald Trump comes back into office in 2024 in the United States, for example, and he becomes even more fascistic, and Britain gets sucked more and more into America's orbit, away from cooperating as it is with Europe. I mean, the British say they can do that because we're not part of the European Union. They've already started on that route. You know, I'm not saying they're going to go that route. but that's definitely one way to conceive. But Europeanization, how that they're defined is a lot of, there's no single way to define it. That's the whole book is about. It means different things from different perspectives, top down versus bottom up versus how, does it mean vested interest? Does it mean developing economic? Does it mean how changing government bureaucracies and making European bureaucracies? There's different. I think the book emphasizes Europeanization, focuses upon institutional change, which means basically bureaucracies. How do bureaucracies, both for-profit and political party and government agencies and ministries, do they develop European departments, European policy routines, European personnel who are responsible in those as hired individuals responsible for those European policy negotiations and European Union implementation. That's their perspective. This notion of ethical community of faith, that's me adding my theory of nationalism, which is what I'm attempting to do right now in my writing, right? And I get really excited about this because I think this is kind of important because, like I said, I have to, somebody's waiting at 12 o'clock. So, if you want to, we start a little bit late because of various issues, but if you want to talk again later, we can. But this notion, you can't understand politics unless you understand emotion. You can't understand emotion unless you understand nationalism, right? So I'll send you this paper, and I've been copying this, recording this, so I'll send you the link to the YouTube. I'll upload to YouTube so you can watch it again if you want to. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. They're really good for me to go review it. No. Yeah.
Okay. Let me end this because I gotta go to the next meeting.